Hey everyone, this is Ira Nicodemus, the most interested man, and today we're talking about the importance of purposeful and engaging work. First of all, thanks so much for joining us today. If this is the first time that you've checked out The Most Interested Man, I encourage you to check out our website. We have some free resources for you, an online assessment you can take that's really going to help you understand how you're doing in what we call the 8 pillars of your life. And then we have a PDF guide that will help you kind of get started in being more successful and balanced across those 8 pillars. So the link's in the description below. Be sure to check that out, and then be sure to subscribe to this channel where we continue to see more content similar to what we're covering today. So today we're talking about work, and work is something that is part of pretty much all of our lives. Unless we're fortunate to be, maybe independently wealthy or retired, work to earn your income is likely something that you're doing. So you spend a lot of your time there, and when you're absent work, as we're seeing unfortunately right now with this kind of shutdown from COVID, a lot of folks are out of work, and the outcome of that can be really bad. There can be a rise in depression, alcoholism, just a lack of purpose and meaning. A lot of kind of bad things come out of the case when there's not purposeful or engaging work. So we know that we're created to work and that work is a good thing. Now, like any good thing though, work can be taken to an extreme. It becomes something that isn't good. So you might think of this as a workaholic, but what I've seen is with my generation, with the kind of millennial age and even younger, that there's a concept that I'm hearing a lot about nowadays that I think isn't healthy, but it's this idea of hustle. Now, I understand that hustle can be a good thing. I'm in a sales role, and there's a lot to be said about just having activity, about continuing to get out there. You're networking, you're going to conferences, you're cold calling, you're marketing, you're doing all these things to just make stuff happen. So that can be a good thing about having that activity and hustling. But when I hear this conversation about hustle, a lot of times it's really more of an unhealthy thing, and really in 2 primary ways. So the first thing about hustle is that when it's taken as more of kind of a workaholic thing, where you're going to do whatever it takes, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, you're going to just do whatever it takes to be successful, it goes against healthy habits in the other areas of our lives. So here at The Most Interested Man, we're all about having this successful and balanced life, and we look at that across these 8 pillars. So work is one of those pillars, and it's important to focus on that and be successful in that area. But when it comes at the expense of the other 7 pillars, then it's not a good thing. And oftentimes I see that kind of being this concept of hustle, is that you're going to focus completely on your work pillar and the other ones suffer as a result. Now, the second thing that I see oftentimes with hustle is that it's kind of this short-term sprint that you're trying to get to this point of financial independence. And it's this idea of if you can just grind it out for whatever it takes for 5 years, maybe 10 years, and get to the point to where you can retire, you can be financially independent, that's the goal. And maybe it's kind of altruistic that once you reach that point, then you're going to focus on these other areas that you want to invest in. Or maybe it's just that you want to be able to, sit on a beach and drink Mai Tais. And, either one of those things, what are we supposed to do with that? And is that a healthy view of work? So what I really want to focus on here is more of that kind of second piece of this idea of, if I can just get to this point of financial independence. And is that healthy? We think about the lottery. I think all of us have probably caught ourselves daydreaming about what it would be like if we didn't have to work. Maybe that daydream is, for me sometimes, it's, I could get an RV and go around the country and see all the national parks for a year or 2. Or I could just retire to the country and have a place and a workshop and, tinker on old guns and stuff like that, the hobbies that I enjoy doing. And we kind of get into these ideas where we just want to get away from work. But is that really a healthy goal to have? You see, work is part of what gives us pride and self-worth. It's something that we're designed to do. If we go and we look at a couple biblical texts, I'll put them up here on the screen. We're going to go all the way back to Genesis. And these are from the Garden of Eden, which is before the fall, before the story of Adam and Eve. They took the apple and they fell into sin, and all of a sudden things changed in the world. But before that, the Garden of Eden was kind of how God intended it. It was this paradise on earth. So when we look at that short few chapters of the Bible from before then, we can really kind of get an idea of how did God intend for things to be before everything got messed up. So let's look at the first verse here. Genesis 2:15 says, "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. If we go back even sooner into Genesis 1:28, it says, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and every living creature that moves on the ground." So what we see from these two passages is that right from the beginning, the original intent of man, regardless of your religious leanings, you can go back and say that, right from this ancient text, that work was something that we were created to do. So work is good, and that leads us to our next question. Why, if work is good, why do you want to quit your job? There was a Gallup study that was done that looked at across the world and across America, did a survey of job satisfaction. They found that here in the US, 70% of people, they weren't satisfied in their job, or I think put another way, they disliked their job. So I would even go to the point of saying that the majority of people here in the country, if they could, they would quit their job. And why is that? We said that work is good, but why is it that so many people are dissatisfied in their job? Well, unfortunately, when sin entered the world and we live in this fallen world, work isn't usually just a case of, take a farming analogy. You're not just putting a seed in the ground, you cover it up, you water it a couple times, and then you just get this beautiful, bountiful harvest and everything's good. That's how it was originally intended to be. But nowadays, it's kind of more like you put the seed in the ground, the bird comes and gets it, you replant it, you're fighting against the bugs and the weeds, you got a drought, and you're continually fighting and struggling with this thing, and then finally at the end of the year it grows, and you kind of get this meager harvest, and you're like, all that, and this is all that I got for it. That's oftentimes a picture of how we feel with our work. And I wish that I could give you kind of this magic answer to say, I can make work easy, or it's going to go back to this way that it's going to, that maybe it was intended to be. But unfortunately, I can't make you that promise. Work, by definition, is going to have risk and disappointment. It's going to be hard. It has these challenges. So really, what I want to talk about today is how do you work through that? And this is where this concept of having purpose and engagement in our work is so important. So let's start by talking about purpose. And I want to use another analogy of think back to a time in your life where you were exercising. It was really hard. Maybe it was, a run last week. Maybe it was high school football practice, but a time where, it just sucked. You wanted to quit, your muscles are burning, you felt your heart was gonna explode out of your chest, and you just said, why am I going through this? You're sweating, it's miserable. Why did you push yourself through that time? Well, most likely it's because you were training for some sort of goal. There was a reason and a purpose that was important to you. Let's say you're running and you're going through this run, you're going through the training, but maybe you're training for a marathon. That can be good, but why run a marathon? What kind of purpose is behind that? Maybe the reason you're doing that is because you're saying, 40 years from now, you still want to be healthy and to be able to be around for your grandkids. You want to be, fit and healthy to engage with them, to play with them. Well, that's now a really deep purpose. The only problem with that purpose is 40 years from now is a long time. And right now you're running and it sucks and you want to quit. So what we need to have is something that is a deep purpose, but also something that we can keep in front of us. And now when we combine those things, we really have that alignment. So ideally within our work, we have a purpose for what we're doing that's directly connected to it and it's in front of us every day. What I often see that men do in their jobs is they kind of have a secondary purpose to their work. So I want to clarify that I'm never going to fault someone for doing this because I think it's very admirable, but it's not really ideal. And what I'm talking about is like, let's say that you hate your job, you don't feel a lot of purpose in it, but you're doing what you have to do, you're going there to earn money or for your family. So it's like your purpose is to provide for your family over here, but what you're actually doing on a day-to-day basis, you don't find purpose in that, but you're getting money and it allows you to meet this secondary purpose. And like I said, I think that's admirable, but it's not ideal. What we want to talk about is how do we engage in something where we're not only earning that income to do all the things we want to do for these other 7 pillars in our lives, but we're also finding purpose in the work itself. So before we talk about how we're going to find that, let's talk about engagement. And engagement is having this challenge and this creativity and really enjoying what you're doing, that it's something that you can really get involved in. The time goes by quickly. You have that level of engagement in your work. What's important as you think about this one is that each person is wired differently. We're each kind of created in a different way. Some people are really going to enjoy the creative side of things. Other people enjoy problem solving. Some people like working in teams. And the way that I like to kind of find this is I say, we got to listen to our 12-year-old selves. And what I mean by that is, think back to when you're maybe 12 years old, you're kind of at this point to where you're starting to develop, where you're not just a kid, but you're still at the point where you haven't really started to do things just because you have to. I think we get into college, we start to work, 15, 16, 17, and then things start to shift. So if you think about those kind of early kind of middle school, early teenager years, what were the things that you enjoyed doing? Were you someone that really enjoyed competition, that you were into sports? Maybe there were certain hobbies that you had. And I'm not looking so much for that thing itself. I'm not saying that if you enjoyed playing baseball when you're 12, you should try to become a professional baseball player or a coach. But I'm saying if you enjoyed the competition or maybe the teamwork, how do you take and say, those are the things that I need to be sure that I'm incorporating into my job? And when you do that, now you're going to increase your engagement because it's the way that you're naturally wired. So we've talked about the importance of purpose and engagement, but how do you go about finding that in your work? Well, most of the time, I'm not going to recommend that, if you think that basket weaving is the thing that you're going to love, that you quit your job, you go to school for basket weaving, and you get out and just hope that you can make a living at it. Maybe there's times where that's going to be the case, but most of the time, what I want to talk about is kind of more of like a slight pivot. And maybe the best way to illustrate this is an example from my own life that happened about a year ago. So I graduated college in 2008 with my undergrad degree, and since then, for about 12 years now, I've worked in the energy and sustainability space. So I help buildings become more efficient. And I spent most of my career on the operation side of that, and I developed a real skill set. You do something for over 10 years, 2,000 plus hours a year, start to get a really valuable skill set. So I was well compensated, but I was working with kind of these big corporate portfolios, and really I was just saving money for these big corporations. And it started to get to where the work wasn't that engaging, it wasn't that challenging because I had been doing it for so long that it was just kind of doing the same thing over. And I didn't really feel a lot of purpose. Well, I'm not against big corporations. How much purpose can you find if you're just like, well, I saved this multi-billion-dollar company another $1 or $2 million on their energy bill. So I was starting to kind of struggle with not having purpose and engagement in my work. So what I did with this is I looked and I said, what are the things that I enjoy about my current job? And then what I really kind of honed in on was I enjoyed that process of getting new projects approved. I enjoyed putting together business cases. I enjoyed presenting. I enjoyed speaking and teaching. I liked working with a team to do all that. So I said, what if I could find kind of more of like a business development role that I still leverage the expertise that I have in energy and sustainability, but I can apply it to something that's going to put more of my time in those things that I find engaging. Now, from a purpose standpoint, I said, how can I work with both customers and also for a company where I can feel like it's a little more connected to my purpose? And what I did was I found a company, the company I'm with now, for my full-time job. And what I found was that the company is smaller, it's privately held. So when I'm successful in my role, I can see directly how that impacts those around me. So I went from a really big company to a smaller company, and that started to help the purpose side. The other thing too is that our company is privately held, and the owner really has a lot of the same values that I have. So when we're successful as a company, when I am successful in bringing in new work, I know that that's going back to treating the employees well, treating the customers well, and even doing charitable work that's in alignment with my own values. So I started to bring the purpose in, and I was also bringing the engagements in. Now, it's also more challenging. I'm learning a new skill set, so that's something that is very engaging for me. But then I'm doing a lot more of what's competitive, presenting, teaching, creating, networking. Those are the things that I really enjoy. So I didn't have to completely get outside of my career. I was able to make a pivot. There is a level of risk when I move from a big company with a sure job, with a high pay, high salary, to going to something that's more of a commission role with a smaller company. It's a big challenge, but it was still a bit of a pivot to where now I have much more purpose and engagement, and I didn't have to completely change what I was doing and abandon the skill set that I had built. As we wrap up, we'll revisit this phrase, which is kind of cliche, but it's this idea that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I know that that's something that we say, and it's like how many people actually can live that. But I hope that what you're thinking about now is maybe how you can take your job and your current career and you can bring it a little bit closer to that thing that you love. We go back to this idea of what about if we could just get to this financial independence, this early retirement? And that's so much of us, that's what we're looking for. But even if you did that, wouldn't you still want to be doing something that was engaging and purposeful? So rather than trying to escape work, what I encourage you to do is to think about how you can maybe take and find those elements of your current role, your skill set, and apply that in a way to where you have more of that purpose and engagement in your role. Do it in a way that your work pillar kind of brings into balance, and then you're still able to focus on those other 7 pillars in your life. Well, men, thanks so much for joining today, and I hope you found this video challenging and interesting and engaging in your own life. If you did, of course, give it a like, give it a share. We really appreciate the support as we continue to build this community. Like I said earlier, check out the website. We really have the resource. We have a written resource on the same content we covered today, and then take that assessment to see how you're doing across the 8 pillars of your life. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, stay interested.